Hello, my name is Alan Clelland, and I'm a member of the Board of Management of the City of Pasadena's Community Access Corporation, PCAC as it's known, and I'm a 24-year resident of the City of Pasadena. PCAC is also known as Pasadena Media, which operates the city's two community access television channels, KPAS and the Arroyo channel. I'm pleased to be the host of this, the sixth of Pasadena Media's monthly On the Move podcasts, exploring mobility issues within the City of Pasadena. Today's podcast looks at the current status of the 710 Corridor Master Plan. This is the city's initiative to repurpose the some 50 acres of land which lies between I-710 and I-210 freeways, and in the mid-70s was designated to be the site of the future link to close the gap between the two freeways. This did not happen, and in 2022, the state relinquished the land to the City of Pasadena. My guest today is City of Pasadena's Vice Mayor Steve Madison, whose council district contains the majority of the land in question and has been personally involved over the years in various efforts to determine the future of the gap closure and use of the land. Vice Mayor Madison, I'm very pleased to welcome you to our podcast On the Move, and appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. As I always do when I come here, I saw the sign out front, Pasadena Media. I love Pasadena, I love media, and I love what you do here at PCAC, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and thanks again for being here. To start off, I think it's important to put the current master plan in the context of the overall I-710 gap closure, because it has been an item for several years, many years, due to its relatively long and complex history. Could you please help our audience by providing us with an overview? Please make mention of your role, especially the key decision-making steps.
Certainly, and thank you for that opportunity. I truly believe, Alan, this is one of the most remarkable public policy cases in the country. I have a master's from the School of Public Policy and Urban Planning at USC, and I would think some professor there might want to teach about this at some point. It goes back 70 years or more now when a plan was put together to build and then complete or extend the 710 freeway from Long Beach up to...
That was 70 years.
Yes. I believe the initial, it's hard to get good data even about things like that, but it was, I believe, in the 50s. And certainly since 1960 and beyond, the plan was to have this extension go right through the middle of these beautiful neighborhoods, not just in West Pasadena, where I've been the city council member for 25 years now, but also South Pasadena. And it really would have destroyed neighborhoods and communities, and by extension, much of Pasadena and what we are. So the action that I got involved in when I ran for city council, got on the council in 1999, was to stop this freeway project. And I was by no means a pioneer in that regard. There were many, many freeway fighters, as they were dubbed, who had really done tremendous grassroots organization and advocacy on behalf of the communities. And so if I could segue into the sort of procedural background that brought us here today quickly, it's a longer story than beyond the scope of this conversation probably. But in the early 2000s, I made a motion, I think it was actually in 2000, I made a motion to my colleagues to take an opposed position vis-a-vis the extension of the 710. Up until that point, the official position of the city of Pasadena had been to support the state's plans to build this freeway. But certainly almost all of West Pasadena was vehemently opposed. Mm-hmm. And we believed most of the rest of the city was. And I was able to cobble together 5 votes to have an opposed position. And that was a significant legislative victory, but it was also a great lesson in politics and governance, because one of my colleagues on the city council, who was very much in the pro-freeway camp at that time, took the matter by way of a referendum to the voters, and it was on the ballot. There was a campaign by special interests and others who had a vested interest, frankly, in a big construction project that. And the measure passed. And so my motion essentially was invalidated by the voters.
Oh, the measure was to support the freeway?
Yes.
Oh.
And you can imagine, with my dear friend and mentor and as fine a person and a public servant as one could ever find, Bill Bogard was our mayor at that time, a committed freeway fighter himself, myself representing West Pasadena. And here we were, essentially mandated by the voters to support this freeway that we knew would be such a bad idea for Pasadena. We could talk lots about why it's such a bad idea, but certainly at this point in time, it's almost 100-year-old now solution to transportation problems that are completely different today and so forth. So we had a period of sort of the dark ages where the official position was support. Personally, privately, many of us continue to believe that was not well thought out. So there then came a point where the feasibility in and of itself, the budget, and one sees things like this in these large public works projects. The high-speed rail through the center of California comes to mind. That as time goes by, if there are delays and significant opposition, the budget grows exponentially, for example, and it becomes harder and harder to justify. So as that was going on, the state then did something very interesting. They switched to, instead of a surface freeway, they switched to a tunnel. Different in kind from an extension at ground level. And so that opened up the possibility that we could once again oppose. And so in the late aughts, if you will, I made not one, not two, but beginning in the late aughts, but 3 separate motions to oppose the tunnel project. The first 2 failed, and so we sort of were handcuffed again, but then the third one actually passed, and that was another monumental legislative victory for us. And we opposed the tunnel and essentially the freeway because the surface route was off the table at that point. And then ultimately, after years and decades of work, just a couple of years ago, the state agreed and formally killed the project. And I testified at a number of California Transportation Commission hearings. And ultimately, in August of 2022, it's about 40 to 50 acres all told. And it includes some smaller patches here and there like sidewalks, but call it almost 50 acres was actually conveyed, title back to the city of Pasadena from whence it had first originated. And we own it now. And so that brings us to the topic at hand that you've raised in terms of a master plan for this acreage.
Excellent. Could I just take a little back to
Please, absolutely.
The 2000s you're talking about?
Yeah.
I was actually appointed to Bill Bogart's 710 committee.
Yeah.
And the latter part, this was when the tunnel was on the table. And there was the opportunity, as you said, to take another look at it.
Yes.
And an awful lot of work went in on that committee to look at alternatives and take a more measured view as to what needed to be done. And I think that fed into the information that you were working from.
It very much did, and thank you for reminding me of that. I believe you're referring to the Connecting Pasadena project, which was the notion that as we were at least preparing to oppose the tunnel, we ought not to just be against something, we should be for something instead, which I completely agree with. And former Mayor Tornick, who actually voted no on my motions to oppose the tunnel, he was part of that. And I give him some credit because I think he ultimately came around to the right side of the issue. I will tell you today, jumping ahead, there's not a small amount of suspicion by some in the community that what we're doing at City Council today is really secretly carrying out an agenda of implementing the Connecting Pasadena project, which was a terrific process and I think a terrific output, but involved a hand-picked group of people. It wasn't a really community-wide or public process per se, and that's a challenge that we have now in the point of to the point of where anything that sort of looks like that proposal then has to overcome the additional burden of convincing people that this wasn't some hidden agenda.
Right.
This truly,
exactly.
Just because there may be agreement on that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It's a good idea.
Yes, yeah. So, well, thanks for bringing us up to date with that. It's been very convoluted history.
Indeed.
For the GAP.
Yeah.
So what's the current status?
So I think let's just deal with the fundamentals first and foremost. We own the property now. And this is probably as good a place as any to clarify that when we talk about the 710 extension, the parcel that we've reacquired now that's been relinquished is the legal term by the state back to us is actually mostly around the trench, the ditch, the portion between the 210 freeway and California Boulevard. There are more properties, as you know. There are the so-called Caltrans homes,
yes.
105 of those. Those basically break down into three groups of the Caltrans homes. And I mention this, it's not directly part of the master plan for the 50 acres that we've now acquired and we own, but it's closely related. And I think any sound proposal would have a comprehensive view of this whole area. Of the 105, there's a group that are occupied and under great legislation by David Roberti and my friend Anthony Portantino, our state senator. The tenants have an opportunity to acquire those based on certain metrics and criteria, but generally those for whom the properties have been their home for many years, it's right and appropriate that they're able to acquire those to have ownership. There's another group, much smaller, occupied by nonprofits. They too have an opportunity to acquire those homes. So think, for example, Ronald McDonald House. Those are Caltrans properties, yes. Or Sequoia School up at the sort of interface between California and the ditch. And then the final group is unoccupied homes, and we're all painfully aware of those because many of them have fallen into a state of disrepair and are subject to squatting and vandalism and all the rest. Those, the City of Pasadena is in the process of another purchase transaction with the state, acquiring those under rules that give us very favorable purchase prices, but which require us to either use the properties themselves or, if we sell them at a profit, use the proceeds for affordable housing.
Oh, excellent.
And that's a terrific initiative too. And it's early days still on that, but we are acquiring those. Some of them we're going to use as Habitat for Humanity ownership properties, I would expect. And the others we probably will sell at fair market value and then use the proceeds to build affordable housing, which we desperately need. But let me come back to the 50 acres or so of the property that we now own. So again, at the risk of repeating myself, we're the owners. We now own this property. And like any conscientious owner, we have an obligation to utilize the property in a way that's appropriate. And that's the process that we've been in now for over 2 years. We formed a citywide working group, task force, which coincidentally has now named itself Reconnecting Pasadena.
Oh, really?
Yep, redolent of the Connecting Pasadena project. And they are discussing and having public outreach and other work streams around what highest and best use the city can make or facilitate there on the 50 acres. Mm-hmm. Now, I think there's some good news and some bad news about that, and I'm happy to share with you my view that much of those discussions have been good and productive, but my view is we're taking too long. certainly government needs to be more deliberative and more measured and inclusive, and perhaps a skosh more thoughtful when it comes to these public resources. And still, time is a dimension of our human condition that can't be ignored. And so here we are over 2 years after taking title. I mean, we've known this was coming for a lot longer than that, but we've owned it for 2 years, and we don't have a plan. We haven't put out requests for proposals for actual development or parkland or any purpose. And so I'm going to be an increasingly loud voice, as I have been on the council. We need to get going here. Yeah, it's time to move. And certainly if you were in the private sector, you'd have some hard questions to answer about why it's taken so long to just pull together your vision and your plan. Right? So here's the current state of play. You have the appointed working group that the council all participated in appointing in a various criteria. I formed some time ago now my own West Pasadena 710 working group for a number of reasons.
And that's separate from the West Pasadena Residents Association?
It is separate and complete. This is my office, my great field rep, Justin Chapman, and I formed this group to advise our office about the 710 project as we move forward. And there were a couple of things that we had in mind when we did that. First, we had as many applicants for the citywide working group as the rest of the city combined. And I may be exaggerating by one or two, but approximately the same number from our district applied to be on that as the rest. And with any appointment that I make, we have over 25 city commissions and boards that we nominate appointees to.
Right.
I always joke that when I make a decision like that, I have a friend for about 2 weeks, the appointee, and then an enemy for life, the person who didn't get the appointment. And well, here we had 25 to 30 people that were not selected. And I thought, well, let's make use of that interest and experience and knowledge. And I think that's the second big factor, which is because this is in our district, in West Pasadena, we have a lot of people that are really well informed and very thoughtful about it. So that's a second sort of path. And then the city council, after some time of introspection, I will say, the mayor formed an ad hoc city council committee, which I applaud him for. And we've now just yesterday had our second meeting. I wish we'd had more, but let's look forward, not backward. And that is 4 council members, which is the amount that you're allowed to have for an ad hoc committee. And those would be the mayor and myself, and Jason Lyon, District 7, and Tyrone Hampton, District 1. So we formed the ad hoc committee. And so those are at least some of the bodies that are meeting and discussing the vision and how we move forward. We've also engaged some consultants. There are consultants that have been engaged by the Reconnecting Pasadena group.
Right.
And they're doing things like an oral history of the area before the state came in and purchased the properties and took the others from the city. There's a consultant that the city has, fabulous transportation consultant, my friends David Granis and Tony Harris at Point C, who are as fine a consulting group for transportation and public policy issues as there is in the country. They're advising the city as they did throughout this whole process, at least in recent years.
David was actually on that committee that I was on.
He's the best, and he's a West Pasadenan himself,
he
so
is
he's
indeed.
Sort of a triple threat there, and they're advising us about the legal requirements attendant to repurposing land that was previously being used by the state for transportation. Course, yes. There's some hurdles there that we have to hit, but I'm confident we'll do those pretty readily. Mm-hmm. And so we're the table's all set, and we're ready to go. And we really do now, I think, need to bring a new sense of urgency to getting about the business. There are going to be some hard decisions.
Oh yes,
no question, right? And you learn in public life that even on ultimate goals that everyone finds salutary, there can be bitter disagreement about the best means to accomplish them. And,
right.
And then sometimes we're thinking about completely separate goals. But that's why we get paid the big bucks on the city council. I think I make about $1 an hour for my council service, and it's an honor to do, believe me. But we're going to have to make those decisions sooner or later, and delaying them, few problems get better if you delay. So I think we just need to get after that.
There's been some attention given in press to this idea of restorative justice.
Indeed.
Because the homes were compulsory purchased from families. And I read recently that Caltrans, part of their action was to sell the homes back to families for the original purchase price.
Yes. So I may be partly to blame for that because I'm one who's been talking for a long time during this decades-long struggle about repatriating not just the property, but also the communities that were there to the extent that we can. And I think the state shares that interest with us. Now, on the properties that are being purchased from the state, those are the Caltrans homes to the south. Yeah. But the point is a good one that we do have some opportunity, especially as we build housing on the 50 acres. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just use the 50 acres as the shorthand for the master plan project. I think we do have an opportunity. I think where one sees disagreement is there's a range of proposals around this, including finding the descendants of those who occupied those homes and businesses, and providing them with an opportunity to have those properties, under very favorable economic circumstance. I am not a fan of that because I think it'd be very hard to execute that in an equitable way. And so my vision, at least, is to have an organic process that will reflect what was there before, but also what we hope to have there in the future for Pasadena.
Exactly.
And I'm confident we'll come up with something that's good. But unfortunately, some of our processes have gotten bogged down so much on that issue. And it's understandable. I mean, the 210 freeway did way more damage to our community than this little trench. But I think for many people, they're vesting their hopes and dreams around restorative justice here because this is the opportunity to do so. And I'm not sure that we're all in complete agreement about the appropriateness of that.
But even aside from that, there must be many other issues that have to be dealt with as part of this considerations in this master plan. Yeah.
I think restorative justice is really a value that we absolutely need to bring. But fundamentally, this is a real estate development project. And we've got huge decisions ahead of us about what the, even things, Alan, like whether we fill in the ditch or not. I'm a big proponent of doing that, or at least covering it and having space below, even if it's not solid earth. We could have subterranean parking or battery storage, for example, or a transportation hub. There are lots of things we could do. But for me, we won't really have recreated what we want if you still have this huge ditch in the ground. Yeah. It's a metaphor, I think, for very regrettable feelings about West Pasadena versus the rest of the city. There was even a proposal at one point about filling it in with water. And I said, we're not going to have a moat, okay? We're going to have the opposite of that. Yes. This is everybody's Pasadena. So big decisions about land use and transportation, big financial decisions. How does the city acquit itself of these obligations and desires as the owner of the land? Do we break it up and sell it? Do we have long-term ground leases? Do we hire a developer to be our proxy, if you will? Or do we contract with developers to have them have the equity in the projects and all? Those are really complicated, big decisions. And they're not ones that a fully built out city like Pasadena has any experience really doing, right? So at one point, the consultants showed us different institutions in Pasadena and literally just picked up the aerial photograph and put it in this parcel, and it pretty much dwarfs almost everything in town, even big things like PCC or
and also
Caltech.
the northern part of the area we're talking about, that borders with Old Town Pasadena, isn't it?
It does.
And there's got to be, you have to be careful with the impact that might have on the character of that part of it.
It should absolutely enhance what we already have in the surrounding areas and maybe improve them. And that's a big factor as well. I, for one, would like to see at that northern part of the location a similar kind of extension of Old Pasadena, and then transitioning as we move further south to more housing. Right. I was just in Mexico City for my day job, my law business, and Mexico City is a beautifully designed city with wonderful esplanades and parkways through the middle of busy streets. I absolutely think we should be studying something like that here, because we have that opportunity of this big parcel that's essentially a blank slate for us now.
Mexico City also has an opportunity to bring in open space.
Yes. Chapultepec Park is twice the size of Central Park in New York. I was blown away.
Right there next to downtown.
Smack dab in the middle of the commercial district, and I took several long walks through that park, and you couldn't hear a thing when you were inside, except the birds and the trees, and it was wonderful. We have that kind of opportunity. So, and I think another hard thing when you're an elected official or a public official is we don't want to design something that would have been great for the last 50 years. What does the future look like?
Oh, yes.
So sustainability, for sure, in terms of the climate and the use of energy and water. There are likely other things that will change, right? I mean, I've got an iPhone in my briefcase that wasn't invented until 2008. What will be the next big disruption in our lives that then we'll want to facilitate? And that's really hard to predict. But again, if a city like Pasadena can't do that, I don't know who can. I think we can be a model.
This is a good opportunity just to mention other opportunities for the community to contribute.
No question.
Yep.
And I mean, we have such wonderful resources in Pasadena: Caltech, JPL, the Carnegie Observatory, moving away from the STEM sort of stuff, Art Center, College of Design, and those minds of design and function, and then the tremendous history that we have here around architecture, and the tree canopy that we have is very important too. So this is a fabulous opportunity, but it's also one that we could have a lot of big misses on if we're not careful. So, there
will be those opportunities for the comment from the community.
No question. There will be tons of public comment and outreach. And,
excellent.
And, I was recently elected by the voters to a new term that starts in December. Mm-hmm. So I've got at least 4 more years. Thank you. I was unopposed, so I joke that it's good to know I can beat none of the above, at least. And I've got at least 4 years more, starting in a couple of months, to work on this and really see this through and continue the great work that was done by Bill Bogart and so many others along the way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Vice Mayor Steve, thank you very, very much for joining me.
Thank you. I hope you'll have me back as we make progress and maybe check in.
Certainly. We want to keep track of this.
Thank you.
Definitely, and keep an eye on it.
Fabulous.
Excellent. I'd also like to thank the audience for watching this and encourage you to look out for future episodes of On the Move as well. Thank you very, very much.